if you're able to see it as a whole, then every single detail is infused with the light of the all. So when you're making the blessing in the morning, when you're lighting Shabbat candles, when you're crossing the street and helping an old lady cross the street, it's all connected to the one.
Just be here now. Just be here now.
Welcome to the Set and Setting podcast with Madison Margolin. As a journalist, Madison has spent years exploring the intersection of psychedelics, cannabis, and culture. This podcast brings together thought leaders from today's psychedelic renaissance to talk about the role of psychedelics in our inner and outer lives. You can support this podcast and find additional resources at BeHereNowNetwork.com/Madison.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Set and Setting podcast. And today we have Benjy Epstein. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. It's such a privilege.
So I'm just going to read a quick bio about Benjy. So Rabbi Benjamin Epstein, Ph.D., is an experienced psychologist, author, and speaker who blends traditional mindfulness-based cognitive therapy with cognitive behavioral, spiritual, and acceptance techniques. Dr. Benjy works effectively across a broad spectrum of age groups to enhance well-being by teaching how to live more mindfully and in the present. He recently got a certificate in ketamine-enhanced therapy, studying under Dr. Mark Brownstein at Reconcious Medical in Durango, Colorado. Dr. Benjy lives in Jerusalem with his wife and 4 children. He has also authored Living in Presence, a Jewish Mindfulness Guide for Everyday Life, a work designed to provide a practical roadmap to the discovery of purpose, to capture and experience some of the benefits of the world to come right now in this world. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to talk to you.
That bio was way too long, but thank you. That's me. You got me. You totally got me.
So the way I met Benjy actually, and this was a few years ago, I was writing a story for Vice, if I recall, about Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath, as sort of this ultimate day of be here now, this ultimate day of being present, of kind of like, the way Timothy Leary would say, turn on, tune in, and drop out. I think that's what we really do on Shabbos. We tune into like a different kind of channel and like state of being. So Benjy, you say you're a rabbi, you're also a therapist. How do you kind of like blend spirituality and actual medicine, and start with, how did you kind of get to this place? What brought you on this path?
I think, I remember that conversation we had, and I don't remember a lot of the conversations I have these days, but it really struck me because you were really asking such wonderful questions about the ideas that you and I were speaking about, and how, in terms of meditation and in different traditions or with other types of medicines, how people can get to that state, and how is it that Shabbat can get us to that. And I was really thinking about it so much during that conversation, because the message, is so clear that Shabbat needs to be this day of being. And it was sort of just like, because there's so many rules, in the Judaism, with this, and people can get so lost in the details, and you forget about the overall picture. And that conversation has stuck with me for I'm always trying to cultivate this mindset. And so I'm very grateful for that conversation, because you're like, how do we do it? Because it's so much easier when you see it. And, you read about, Rav Zalman, Shachter Shalomi definitely has his unique way of doing it. But it's something that has really stuck with me. So I want to thank you for that. In terms of combining spirituality and traditional psychotherapy, it's been a real blessing for me, because starting in graduate school, you start getting exposed to the ideas of mindfulness. We'll just jump into that's when I started, when I was exposed to people like Ram Dass. And that's probably the first time I read Be Here Now. And it was just like, oh, wait a second. Like, you could be a contemplative person. You could be a person who is focusing. And again, we're so careful in psychology, traditional, to keep the B word out of traditional therapy. That's Buddhism for those keeping score at home. And I was sort of just like, this is wonderful. We're actually, even though they do everything they possibly can to strip it of any religious or spiritual meaning, to make it, operational, and to make it so you could put it into, what's they're called, 8-week protocols. But who are we kidding here? We're talking about really tapping into essence and tapping into soul. And so that, for me, flipped the switch. And, hey, Buddhism is doing it really well, and they're trying to do it in therapy. What about for my own tradition? And then I ended up moving to Jerusalem, so it makes it a lot easier, because most of my clientele is, for most of their lives, the spirituality, the religion, the tradition is either, something that they have some sort of negative attitude towards, and that's definitely coming up in therapy, or they're trying to incorporate more of it and using that therapeutically. So for me, I've been really blessed to be in this sort of time period. You see this resurgence. You can talk about it with spirituality, you talk about it with mindfulness, you talk about it with yoga. Meaning, when Ram Dass was starting, for example, yoga was extremely taboo. And now it's like, hey, what in terms of Ram Dass, in terms of what he sort of was preaching, for lack of a better word, is feels novel right now. And so it's like, it's a great time. It's an amazing thing and you're someone who I look up to, and see how you're also working on combining your spiritual traditions with these contemplative types of the phenomena of Jubus and things like that, but really trying to keep it OG, trying to keep it original or organic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inspired by the OG, by Ram Dass, by a lot of the people of that generation. And, part of what my own spiritual practice is like updating it, right? Like, I grew up with Be Here Now, and it was almost like my rebellion against that, when my parents were just like saying, I would be like a kid kind of just fetching about God knows what. And they'd be like, just be here now, just be here now. And I'd be like, no, no, if you're telling me to be here now, that's specifically what I'm not going to do then.
Right. I'm going to be anywhere else but here.
Yeah. And I joined cross country, and I was always running, and I was running away. And I was like, there were all these ways that I wasn't here and now, like in my body. Right. Like, and I'll be straight up, like in high school, I had an eating disorder. Right. So that's another way sort of out of your body a little bit, starve yourself out of your feelings almost.
Or just being in contention with yourself.
Exactly.
It's like, I mean, not to, keep bringing it back to Ram Dass, but like he, I think for a lot of people, he's the first person who exposed us to this idea, till I started learning like more like mystical traditional texts. But, he was like one of the first people to introduce you, and like everyone's like, oh, radical acceptance is like, hey, he's the first person who said, hey, you don't need to do anything to be deserving of love. And it's like, it was radical then. It was really radical. And I guess it's still radical now, because we all need that. We all need that message. It's as much as we can, and to actually preach it, and then to actually practice it is a whole different ballgame.
Right.
And I think that.
And I guess the other question is, what is Be Here Now for this generation? Especially when we're in circumstances that, again, really are uncomfortable, and really, someone said, can we like meditate our ways out of, a pandemic or fascism or whatever's going on?
Right.
Like, what do you do with that?
It's, like, we all want the spiritual bypass. We all want to just sort of there's a verse in Tehillim, Psalms, that's, I'm not going to get it right. It's a verse in Isaiah. It's like, can I do Hebrew? We do Hebrew, or just
use
translate
the Hebrew,
it?
but then translate it, because
Okay. Can I do the quick Google? Because it's just nice in Hebrew. It's Lech Ami. Right. He's talking to my nation, right? This is Isaiah the prophet. And again, I don't know, you'll forgive me for my ignorance about, I don't know how long ago the Jewish prophets lived, but just for the record, we had prophets. Just putting it out there for anybody who's just like what we're going through, we had prophets, bring it back. And we'll talk about at some point how Ram Dass's connection to his guru, which is also another thing that just inspires, because he is unabashedly open about connecting to his guru. And hey, we have our tzaddikim also, and it's sort of just like, hey, and we can talk about going to Uman for the pilgrimage and things like that. And it's like bringing those types of things back to our traditions. But again, don't let me get too ADHD.
For people who don't know the term, tzaddikim are like righteous people, like kind
the
of
righteous
holy
individuals. That's the Hebrew term for like guru. Yeah. Lecha mi ba bechadarecha uskar dlatecha ba'adecha chavei kimat rega ad ya'avor zam. So like he says, talking to my people, go into your room and close the door and just hide out a minute. It says kimat rega, just a minute, ad yavor zam, until the anger passes, until this plague passes. And it's just like we're trying to get away from it, but we can't. And we want to be able to do it, and we have these wonderful devices that completely hijack our ability to focus and our ability to pay attention and our ability to really experience things in a deep way. And so what we need to do is we need to create this idea of Shabbat, and where we just shut down, and we have this mindset of we don't need to do anything other than just be. And if we don't force ourselves to do it right now, we get caught up in this torrent. And it's just a really frightening thing to see how people's images of themselves are so affected by what they're hearing and the negativity bias. And every time you open up your phone, some terrible tragedy happened, and it could just be so demoralizing. And so we sort of have to fight fire with fire. And we really have to keep, beating this drum of you don't need to be going out of yourself. You don't need to be doing something more, and to just give that presence and be in that presence. And it's easier said than done, because the formal practice is time consuming, but it's doable. It's doable for everyone.
And when go on, and
Sorry.
then I'll
No. My thoughts.
When
don't really
you
finish.
said fight fire with fire, like when you're cultivating whatever, this kind of presence and integral sense of self through Shabbos, through meditation, through being here now. Is that the fire? Like, how does that actually enable you to then go out and fight the external fire? Like what's the point of just kind of like cultivating this in ourselves? How does that then enable us to go forward in the world and do acts of service, or just kind of like be productive people? And I don't mean productive in the capitalist sense, but just be functioning in a system, in a society, where we're needed and where change is needed.
Right. The real fire is seeing the bigger picture of what you're doing in your spiritual service, and not seeing it as some sort of compartmentalized, like I do this, and you check the boxes. But once you start to realize that there is an organic whole to everything you're doing, and then it comes back to something that's like really simple, like faith and service, and ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow man like you love yourself. Right? It has to become part of it. And again, we talk about intergenerational trauma, and only specifically speaking about the Jewish tradition, which I feel comfortable speaking about. We've become very, very cloistered, and we've become very, I don't know, not cynical, but just paranoid, or just very, it's hard. It's hard for us to really be exposed to the outer world and feel safe, and to feel like, hey, we have something to offer. But, in the perennial wisdoms, there's so much overlap. And I think one of the more, refreshing things from Ram Dass was just seeing like, wow, there's so much, and he had to work through his stuff with Judaism also. I mean, that was part of his cosmic, karmic journey. And he really came around. I just recently, our friend, Rabbi Zach Kamenetz, who's doing amazing work, posted this video of him speaking. I don't remember exactly to what hundreds and hundreds of Jewish, United Jewish College or something. I'm going to get it wrong. And it was just, he was telling his story, which he tells very well, but just how he had these moments where it was so similar to like a Hasidic story, and it was just like unbelievable. But when you say talking fire with fire, it's that passion and that commitment, and not letting the apathy or the coldness of just the opposite of warm and loving care, because you could just get despondent with the getting just overrun by the waves. And with Corona and this pandemic, that isn't over. even though we all pretend like it, I don't know if you pretend like it is, but I'm saying we like to pretend that it is. It's not. It's not. And people, when we get back to normal, what does that even mean?
Mhm.
And so to start being more aware that the time on this earth in this iteration is finite, and the way that we're conducting ourselves, that far off future that we think, oh yeah, we'll deal with these things later. It's like, hey, you don't know how things are going to turn out. So let's really do that soul searching. But it feels like because people are in the grips of fear and terror, it just feels like there's so much more, especially, people not being able to hear one another, people not being able to respect one another. And, that message of love being so pervasive, which sounds, it sounds trite, but when you're in the presence of these types of beings, it's like, right, we can do that. We can really tap into that, love, serve, remember, and these things. And I just feel like we're at this precipice. And I'm not one of the leaders. I'm just sort of just going along with the flow, but and watching people like you take the mantle. But I just think that this conversation and this language, we keep talking it, and we keep, even if it's not always fully embodied, it's powerful. And the zeitgeist and the language has changed. And, we just have to really tap into our own spiritual strengths and believe in it, and believe
Mhm.
that the kind gesture and the good word and the forgiving and the selfless acts of service, are what are make a difference.
So I have I've been collecting questions as as you're talking.
Oh,
There was
good.
one thing you said when, and this is sort of just a side question before I get into the meat of
Sure.
my other questions. When Ram Dass was addressing, when was sort of telling his story to a Jewish audience, and you said it was like almost a Hasidic story. What did you mean by that exactly?
So he goes, I mean, I'm assuming everyone on this podcast, so I'm not going to tell the story again, but he goes to India because the drugs weren't doing it for him, right? He was just another thing that he was chasing. And he said, I'm looking for something deeper. It's been a while since I've reviewed the Be Here Now, but, he goes into the India, and he's with this other guy. I'm blanking on the name. And the other guy's getting really excited, and he shows
Bhagwan
up.
Das?
Bhagwan Das, Bhagwan.
Could
I
have.
don't know. I'm
I
making
don't know.
names.
Okay, forget it.
It's
Well,
the person who brought him to Neem Karoli
hmm.
Baba, and he's that guy's starting to bow, and he starts to cry, and they show up in a car, and the first thing he says to him is like, "You give me the car." And Ram Dass is like, "This guy's good. This guy went right for it." He's like, "You make money," and he was like, "This guy he's not on the level." And then he called him back, and he told him this story about how he had gone out to pee in the forest the night before, and he had this unbelievable strong feeling of connection to his mom, who had passed away a few months before. And speaking very little English, he just turned to Ramdas and Neem Karoli Baba said, "Spleen," right? Like that she died from having an enlarged spleen. And Ramdas just said he felt this unbelievable weight lifted, this burning feeling, everything. He just completely crumbled. He just broke him open. And it reminded me of this story of a Hasidic rabbi named Yosef Mordechai of Ishbitz, the Ishbitzer, and the Kutzker. And the story goes that the Kutzker had been traveling around looking, and he was a genius of geniuses, similar to Ram Dass, just super intellectual, but was looking for something and not finding it, and just sort of becoming a recluse and doing his own thing. And then, he went to the Rebbe, the guru, and for Shabbos and Friday night, he just stayed in the back learning. And then, Shabbat day, same thing, just wasn't feeling it. He's just looking around, seeing the revelry, seeing whatever scene was going on in the Hasidic court. And then by the final hours of Shabbat ebbing away, the most holy time, the lights are out, and there's the singing, or there's the Rebbe, the leader, sharing his words of wisdom. And suddenly the Kutzker starts screaming. He says, "It burns. It burns." That there's something that he was able to connect him to. And once you have that experience, there's nothing else to talk about. He's like, even when he's saying the story, he's like, take it or leave it, but if you have that experience and you connect in that way, there's nothing else to talk about. And, I don't need to explain it to you, and I don't need to prove it to you, and it's just, for me, it's like to hear the stories, and from my tradition also, just like these people exist. And these people exist, and you could say in the Bodhisattva, coming back and just to help people. And that's the way we look at the tzaddikim also. But it's just something that's so empowering for me, that somebody who's a PhD in Harvard, who literally was on the tenure track, and he just said, I'm going to start wearing these white robes. And for my own tradition, to be able to be like, let's get really into what my traditional faith is, without feeling self-conscious and without feeling, too uncomfortable with it. And it's like, hey, let's embrace it. So I think it's really empowering. It's an empowering message. But I just remember being taken like, oh my God, like that happens in my faith too. And again, I want to find people like that. I haven't had a burning sensation yet, but I've had my heart break a few times.
Yeah, no, it's funny because a lot of people also connect to Maharaji, like not in the flesh, right?
Right.
And a lot of people, connect to other, Jewish rabbis or other holy people who are not physically in their bodies but are still connecting to that spirit. So could still happen.
I mean, it's supposedly easier, meaning because they're not bound by this physical form.
Mm-hmm.
And again, even me saying it, I'm like, oh my God, what do I sound like right now? But it's just like, hey, you sound okay. This is how my teachers speak. And we really, like we say, we talked about, going to Uman to pay the pilgrimage to visit the grave of one of the tzaddikim, Rabbi Nachman of Uman, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And, to try to explain it, and from a person who's coming from a rationalistic perspective, it's just like, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But, he says, I want you to be with me. And
right.
You feel it. You really feel it well, again, we'll call it the Anash, the Anshe Shlomenu, the people, the Chaver who are going, the group of people who are going, and they're the Sangha. And it's a 30,000, people Sangha, but it's just like, you're either going to Uman or you're not. It's like that's how the world is divided these days.
It's like Ken Kesey, like you're on the bus or you're not, like the Mary
You're
Prankster.
on the bus or you're not. And they weren't trying to proselytize, and they weren't trying to convince people. And they're just like, hey, you're either getting it or not. And it's okay if you don't.
So just to give context to the audience. So there's a Rebbe.
Audience.
Yeah. There's a Rebbe, Nachman of Uman, who, his burial site is in Uman, Ukraine. And every year for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, what is it? You said 30,000 people go, and
and that's a conservative.
And it's known as, Weiss once called it the Hasidic Burning Man. It's this kind of ecstatic. It's not true. You're saying your thumbs downing it. Not true.
No, I think it's just not a good. I mean, I've never been to Burning Man. I'm excited to get invited with, whoever wants to invite me. But it's just, there's just like, less revelry and much more. I mean, I think somebody recently from I forget which publication, he was expecting to be the Jewish Burning Man, and he wasn't disappointed. He was sort of surprised, saying like, it's just spiritual longing. It's just prayers, dancing, and singing, and it's just, it's really. And of course, there's going to be some debauchery, but it's very fringe.
Maybe more like fringe. Kumbh Mela in a way.
I don't know what that is.
Kumbh Mela is this like gathering of holy people, of sadhus in India, and it's massive, and it's really like all of the holy people. I guess in the case of Uman, it's a lot of people who want to connect to holiness. Not necessarily. I mean, maybe they're also holy people, sadhus, tzaddikim in their own right, but
they are. They're all the cool people, all the cool kids are there. And I'm looking around, I'm like, I can't make any sense of it, but I'm saying pretty much every single person who I'm drawing from spiritually either is there or wishes they could be there, but they can't because they have other sort of, this worldly obligations. And I was like, their congregation might. But this is funny because, like, talking about, is that okay? We're talking about Ram Dass a lot, is this that?
No, that's the point.
The thing, so the point is like, he said something along the lines of like, how can I respect a religion where my father, who was on the board of the synagogue, could fire or hire you? It was just like, and it's so true. And it's like, it was, and again, the 50s in America and the congregations that he was praying in, it's sort of like, that was, and then you can't respect somebody who's a spiritual leader who you can fire or hire. It's just like, that's not how it works. And, the people who I'm, drawing from, they're you can't hire or fire these people. They're, they're on the level,
right? That makes a lot of sense. Is it sort of transcends sort of those kind of like
Yeah,
lower
transactional. It's like it's a
yeah.
job. And he shared with his rabbi that he had, or a rabbi shared with him that he had this unbelievable vision of going to the Egypt, the desert, and something like that. And Ram Das was like, "Did you share it with your congregation?" And he's like, "I would never do that." And that was, like, that's
Yeah.
and it's just like, and it's a turnoff. And it's been a turnoff, but there's a real resurgence of studying mysticism, and it has to be tempered with actual practice and not getting too far off the deep end. But like, there's just even the language, the jargon. You could be throwing around words like meditation and hitbonenut or hitbodedut. These are all spiritual practices, and nobody even bats an eye anymore. You could talk about the Kabbalistic spheres in very modern circles, and it's very they're I'm not saying that everybody knows and everyone's fluent in it, but you're not looked at as like, what is that? That's not really something that's part of mainstream Judaism.
So you just translate quickly. And I have a few more questions that I want to
Yeah,
get.
yeah, of course.
Just translate. You use the term hitbonenut or hitbodedut, which are two separate but related terms, and you also mentioned the Kabbalistic spheres. So just in elevator pitch, like, just say what these things.
No, so they're just different forms of meditation. Bonenut is going to be contemplation, which the Chabad school of Chassidut, which is coming. Chassidut started from the OG guru, the Baal Shem Tov, and his students all formed different sort of, not sects, but they had their own unique characteristics, and they sort of had their own approaches to God, which is again another beautiful thing, that you have so many different paths to connect. There's not one way. But the Chabad school, which is an acronym for the Hebrew words Chachma, Bina, and Dat, which are the highest Kabbalistic spheres, which are Chachma is wisdom, Bina is understanding, and Dat is fusion of those. It's a really intellectual way of contemplating God, and you're really coming into this real meditative state, which is these people were spending hours and hours. And then there's an idea of Hitbodedut, which was really something that we believe that our forefathers were doing out there, shepherds, and they were just communing with God, having their own unique way of talking to God in their own language, using their own vernacular. And that's something that Rabbi Nachman really, said is a basic way of getting into this meditative state, because at some point, the more you do that, the more you're going to really tap into soul.
And that's like talking to God as a friend.
As a friend, but as a friend where it's just you get, and it's not like it becomes like you go into a trance, but at some point the words that you are coming up with, start to really, you get behind the veil, and that's who am I really? And it's something, you're fetching about, your knee pain, or in fact you have nothing to say, but at some point, you get really down to some nitty gritty things of just like, and you could get angry, you could sometimes use some salty language, but it's like, it's so real. And then it gets down to like, I just want to be connected to you. And you almost get swallowed up.
And that's what you mean by getting down to soul also, is like just talking. I mean, I've heard that talk therapy actually was partially inspired by this practice of just, have you heard that before?
There's a verse, in the Talmud. The Talmud it quotes the verse where it says, Daga belev ish yashchena or yisichena la'acherim. It says, if a man has a worry in his heart, he should either suppress it, right, which is not good therapy, or yisichena la'acherim, just talk it out, just again, and that becomes like, hey Freud, we've got that too. But there's something about that stream of consciousness that if a person's doing it consistently enough, you could really tap into essence, you tap into soul, and you've had these conversations where it's at some point with the right people, the conversation will become something, you'll get to it. You could be joking around, you're talking about music and sports and just goofing, but at some point, you're able to really connect on that level with the right people. It's got to, set and setting, which is key. But, to have that, but it's the consistency. It's with any practice. It's with yoga, it's with meditation, it's with working out, it's the violin, it's showing up. Mm-hmm. It's showing up to do it. But the fact is, like, I'm empowered when I'm speaking to people to bring this up as a possible therapeutic technique. Mm-hmm. Again, it depends on the set and setting also. And the person is willing to be, looking into these things and trying these things. But, there's even the prayer is supposed to be getting really, really, the daily prayers in the Jewish service, it's supposed to be getting really, really, really quiet and
Mm-hmm.
then listening to what comes up. And of course, we have these set prayers that sort of give you the framework, but the real work is, what you're coming up with on your own, the mantras that we're doing.
And you mentioned also the Kabbalistic spheres. So just,
Yeah,
just so people understand, like it's almost as if you're mapping these Kabbalistic spheres onto the human body. So that's
yeah,
sort of like the
the
way people
human,
think of chakras in a way.
yeah, for sure. There's definitely an overlap. There's
Mm-hmm.
definitely an overlap between these, which is why it's so beautiful, because you could tap into it and we could talk about these things, and the heart chakra and the whatever this one is, and seeing that there are probably corresponding Kabbalistic spheres, but on a just basic is that there's a belief that these are the building blocks that God sort of infused into creation, and everything can be boiled down into, and it's in a combination of all those things. And when you tap into that and you bring it back to its divine source, then you're connected,
Mm-hmm.
and you're really connected into that divinity, which is again that idea of, that's what we're all souls. We're
Mm-hmm.
all souls, and if we're tapping into that, so then hey, you're not sweating the small stuff, and you're also behaving in a way that's befitting what you just behave differently. You're not a goal. Excuse me. You know what he said? You're not a role. You're a soul.
I
That's
love that.
that's the best. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
had such good one-liners, but like that one hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, stop. You're not who you think you are. Right.
Right.
And we say it every day in the Jewish prayers. You wake up every morning, Elohai neshama shenatata bitori, my God, the soul you gave me, is pure,
Mm-hmm.
that I am a pure soul, and that's immutable, and that's untouchable. And that's something that I think, Ram Dass was really open about, and really, and related to you as such. And that doesn't mean you're not going to fall into unskillful behavior. I mean,
Right.
I keep saying that's the best part about him, but like the best part about him for me was, his idea that whatever neuroses he had before all of the trips, spiritual, psychedelic, service, they didn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
He just didn't get as bogged down by it, which is such a teaching, because I definitely want to get rid of my neuroses. Like, I want to strangle them. I want to kill them. I just come on. And there's that part of me that just says, if I could just, divest myself from these earthly physical things, it's just like, that's not it. And that's not what he was teaching. And that's not what my traditions are teaching either.
So
You
I
know?
have a question is, especially coming from the perspective of you have a PhD. It's not so often in the therapy world that people are using the word soul all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think also when we talk about psychedelic therapy, that's
Yeah.
really forcing practitioners to like reckon with this concept that is more that borders on the mystical, that's more than just what, textbook therapy necessarily can bring up. So I guess what's that like, navigating the concept of soul in a therapy practice, and how does that relate also to psychedelic therapy? And I know we mentioned that in your bio, you're working with Dr. Mark Brownstein, who is involved with ketamine therapy. So I just want to
Yeah.
take it more psychedelic for a second.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still getting my feet wet, dipping my toes in the water, but I just think that the healing principles, powers of these medicines, when done correctly, can be, you don't need my approbation. It's just the research is there. And, they started with Timothy Leary and Ram Dass, or they were definitely some of the starters of it. And it's coming back now again. Props to our friend Rick Doblin. But it's the same thing. It's so funny that you mentioned it, because there's such a not a contrast. There's such a similarity, because it's really when you sort of meet the person where they are. I think Matthew Johnson, who's doing research out in Johns Hopkins, is doing a lot of cool work with addictions and psychedelics. I think he was the first federal grant to look at psychedelics and alcoholism now, and it's really cool stuff. But he was talking about, like, that the mumbo jumbo, the heebie-jeebie. Every single person who's doing this has like a statue of the Buddha, and has their own altar set up. And he's just like, hey, let's not impose our belief system or how we think it's supposed to look on the client, on the patient, on the fellow traveler. And this is the same thing in therapy. Meaning, if you're coming in and you feel like God is out to get you, and you feel this like, real, what's the word? This, it's just that feeling that God is out. There's a word for it, but I just don't remember what it is. It's a complex, but I can't remember the word. Regardless, they're talking about the soul. They're talking about they're talking about relationship with God and how God, because religion is important to them. And there are people who don't want to talk about it. So why would I mention it? Meaning it's really where they are, but I'm very comfortable talking about it. Let me rephrase it. I've gotten more comfortable about it because I'm realizing that's what some people are looking for. So why should my graduate school training that says keep God out of this room by every stretch of the imagination, when they're bringing, their ideas of God and spirituality, sometimes positive and sometimes negative, but it's impacting their day-to-day lives. So if you're having one of these transcendental experiences and you can't explain it because the default network went off the grid and they're feeling connected to all of humanity and they're having visions and saying like, hey, or the ego death and realizing that everything is one. It's like, you want to make that into something other than, what that person is expressing. I don't see a reason to do that.
Go on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, you can cover.
I was just going to say, is there a way to
start.
explain what a soul is, explain the concept of soul in psychological terms?
I don't know if there's language for that. Because I've never really approached it from that sort of, hey, you're depressed right now. Let's talk about, your childhood upbringing. And let's talk about, that radical self-acceptance, but who's the self? What's the self? If your self is just the thoughts or the emotions, those transient things, or the body, then, hey, you sort of get, it's a limitation. There's almost a limitation on how deep and how much you can do. And again, I in my head, there are voices in my head screaming, stop talking about this. You sound like you're a complete, you're bonkers. You have to stick to the science. You have to stick to what's empirical. You have to give them their beady eyes before the session and after the session. But, and then I'm empowered by my spiritual teachers who say, you cannot just treat those symptoms. You cannot look at this person as merely just like a mush of chemicals. And that's it. And again, that's not for me to say, but when somebody is coming in and saying, I want to be more in touch with who I really am, I want to start meditating more. I want to start accepting myself more. And by accepting myself more is really just being in the moment, really fully present. Because that is, you talk about what's the idea of be here now. And be here now is saying like, I'm the way it is right now, fully accepting what that is with my thoughts, with my feelings. But it's more than that. It's more than that sum of the parts. Is that soul? Maybe. But again, it's like, it's not the Pixar movie, although there are some interesting things there going on there. But, we don't have the language necessarily. And it's so experiential. You could be at a fish show and tapping in. No, you don't think so?
Yeah, I was just at the fish show. I'll say I'm not the biggest fish fan. I kind of was.
You're only allowed to. There's no middle ground. Like with the Grateful Dead, you're either obsessed or you're just like no.
I'm on the right side of that of that paradigm, but I'm really into the Grateful Dead. So
right. No, but the music can be put it into
for
words.
sure, transcendental. Transcendent.
And part of it is the ineffability of it. And look, it's not all. It's meditation, yoga, psychedelics. It's not all, unicorns and rainbows. And I think there has to be some caution with that, with the spiritual bypass, or with the kumbaya or the kumzit, which is like, the singing of the Jewish, music without words, the nigunim, which is similar to kirtan, except kirtan is so much cooler. Or that's just me. Let's do some Jewish kirtan, but that you get into that flow state, and I am sure you could come up with some scientific reasoning as to why that is. But like when you've touched that ineffability, it's sort of just like, okay, That's fine if you need to tell yourself that. But yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of also want to understand, like, this is technically a podcast about psychedelics that we haven't been talking so much about the medicine, but I feel like everything we're talking about is so psychedelic. And I think what I want to really touch on or explore is like, how is, as this flow state, how is the state of being here now? How can, different meditation practices, hit bodhidut, whatever it is, engender psychedelic states? Like what is a psychedelic state in general, with or without the drugs, right? Like, how do we just define what is psychedelic? Is that an association with the soul rather than like with the kind of like mundane, like ego-driven consciousness? Or, in rabbinic terms and psychological terms, like what are we talking about here?
In like the rabbinic terms, or the more, again, back to the more mystical terms, it's like this idea of bittul, this idea of nullification. And again, you're not nullifying yourself, you're nullifying the self that you thought you were. And what's left is that piece of divinity. And so there's definitely a more popular opinion within the mystical, Jewish mystical, is that drugs are just, the medicine, the psychedelic plant medicine, is sort of like not it, because, similar like Ram Dass, like that's not going to keep you there, even though it might give you a glimpse. So I think even the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who is, again, talk about, the closest person who I can imagine, again, relative to what, the impact that Neem Karoli Baba had on his many thousands of followers, both in the flesh and once he left his body, is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I mean, you read the stories and you read the miracles and you read about the common sense and you read about the laughter and you read about the joy and you read about the absolute love for humanity and the positivity. And you're just like, that can't be a person. That can't exist. So he talks about it, and he says, like, he acknowledges that if there's a medical benefit for it, but there has to be, he similar to what Ram Dass was trying to do, is like, there has to be a way to do it from a meditative state. And in terms of what, defining psychedelic, it's just, I think that, it's not just the groovy art and music. It's really, if we're doing it correctly, because again, plenty of our friends and acquaintances have had, exposure to these types of medicines and haven't really had those types of experiences, or they come back down pretty quickly, because again, if you're not doing it with that integration, so it could really have that positive therapeutic impact. But I think in terms of what we're really trying to get to is this idea of dveikut, which is attachment, like really, connecting to the divinity within and divinity surrounding us.
Attachment to God, you're saying, through that
attachment to God, or the God that's enlivening everything. Every single leaf, every single blade of grass, every single creature on this earth, every single breath you take. Maharaji is writing in his journal every day, Ram, 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 which is God, 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 God. Like, he needed to write that every day. But there's different planes or consciousness of existence, and the more we're able to, we could be looking at the same thing and we're not talking about the same thing at all.
Right.
And the way these people, if we could use their eyes, or the way you felt when you're in the presence of these people, it's like, right, that's what's possible for me. That's what Sharon Salzberg talks about. When you're in the presence of these beings, it's like, oh, I didn't know I was capable of that. So what is that? Who is that? And it's just like, you get stuck up in, when you get like, what's happening, once you start asking those questions, you're already out. You're out of that state. You're like, what's that? Am I enlightened right now? It's like, definitely not.
Right. When you're asking, you're not.
Yeah. If you're asking, are we there yet? It's like,
am I high? Am I feeling it? Am I high? You're asking the question. You're not.
It's like, am I high? Am I high yet? Like, yeah, I don't think it's kicking in. Like, okay. Yeah. You're eating.
Someone once, I remember in college, someone said to me, he was telling me how he was going to marry his girlfriend. I said, are you in love? He goes, he's like, I'm like, how do you know if you're in love? He goes, if you have to ask, then you're not,
Right. And
so,
yeah, for sure.
I mean, and these are these embodied states, like being in love, being high, being kind of just like in this sort of like full presence. I mean, I think that's part of what psychedelic is.
Yeah. And you're in that, and people will say that that's not really it, but it's like you're more present and you're more aware of what's really happening, or at least what else is also happening. That you're not constricted by like, seeing is believing. It's like you're getting fooled. You're getting fooled, and the more you can acknowledge that you don't know, cultivating that don't know mindset, and cultivating the beginner's mind, and cultivating the ability to just, okay, this is it right now. And can I be fully with it right now? And ultimately, like, a lot of what I'm thinking about these days, thanks to the pandemic, is, cultivating healthy death awareness. And it's just another thing of just like the way to do that. And this is another thing that I sort of picked up from Ram Dass. I didn't pick it up, this is like, inspired by, is his service to people who were, sitting with people, just sitting with people as they were passing. And it was just like, talk about a psychedelic experience, talk about just not needing to say anything, of just being there. And is there any depth to how much presence you can really give? And in that moment, when that person is more alive than ever, because there's this capacity to, because you're not stuck by the ego anymore. Right? And you're in that translucent state, and you're going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And he says something really, you see this, this guy, John Hopkins, which is not to be confused with Johns Hopkins. I don't know. He makes these I think psychedelic music or something.
Yeah, I know him, John Hopkins.
And so, of course you do.
Well, I know I don't know him
You're
personally.
the coolest person I know. So cool people. Oh yeah, it's like who's who in Madison's phone book, and it's just like it's cool people. It's cool people, which is why I'm definitely getting cooler by association. Not that it's cool to define things as cool or uncool, but like if we had to put labels on things, which we try not to, you're definitely one of the cool people.
I think you're super cool, so that's why you're here.
That's what I was fishing for. What I was fishing for. But yes, my stock just went up. No, but so he just came out with this song, and it's Ram Dass talking over it. And he's like, you don't worship the gate, you go into the inner temple. And I'm just like, oh my God. It's like Pitchuli Shari Tzedek. Like, open up the gates of righteousness. Avovam Odeya. Zeh Shar Ladonai. This is the gateway to God. Sadikim Yavovo. Go in. We stay out because we're afraid, and we for good reason, because there's a lot of unknown. But once once we get over that fear, and the time again, it all ties back in together. You see the connections. Rabbi Nachman's most famous popular aphorism was Kol ha'olam kulo. The entire world is a gesher tzar ma'od, is a narrow bridge. Ve'ikar lo litpached klal. Don't be afraid. But what they translate litpached is the transitive verb. I don't know anything about Hebrew grammar. It says, don't make yourself afraid. Don't bug yourself out. Because what we end up doing is we limit ourselves, and we stop ourselves, and we're afraid to just take that step, to take that leap of faith. And talking back to Ram Dass, of just saying, hey, he gave it up. He gave up everything. And again, he ended up, once he realized that he gave up everything, then he says, you have everything. Mm-hmm. Once you give up everything, literally, not give up, in the God forbid, giving up on yourself, but giving up all of the attachments, then you have everything, because nothing can be taken from you. And you just, and I admire that. And I try to see as much as I can how in our own traditions, because Judaism has so many rules. And again, the truth is, you start to read what Ram Dass was up to, and the Hinduism, it little bugs me out a little bit. It's just it's a little bit out there for me, just because I didn't grow up with it. There's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of rule following. But again, if you're able to see it as a whole, then every single detail is infused with the light of the all. So when you're making the blessing in the morning, when you're lighting Shabbat candles, when you're crossing the street and helping an old lady cross the street, it's all connected to the one. It's all one. If you have that consciousness, which you have a harder and harder time doing that when you're just so focused on checking the boxes and responding to emails. And we just he just really embodied this idea of trying to connect everything into that all is one, and that's what we're going for.
Would you say that's the essence of like a psychedelic state, is really just like embodying that awareness of all is one? And is that, I wanted to also ask you about sort of this concept of the guru, a rebbe, a sadhu, a holy person, a tzaddik,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it, whatever language. Are those people like Maharaji in this kind of consistent psychedelic state, in that they're maintaining this embodied awareness of that oneness? And is that what we're aspiring to? Is that what we like to soak up, be in the energy of when we spend time with these holy people?
I think you nailed it on the head. I think it's such an accurate depiction. Again, it's with disbelief. You hear that Ram Dass gave him like a heroic acid trip. You gave him like 3 tabs of specially. It's coming back to me. Like I remember reading and be like, okay, whatever. Okay, come on. And then you think about it, maybe. Meaning it's like, yeah, he blinked a few times. He gave him, 900. I don't remember how much. Just an absolutely massive dose of LSD to his guru, and his guru didn't, seem to have any difference in behavior, which to me says, yeah, it's that they're in that psychedelic state, but it's not. It's just that seeing the oneness and seeing you as you really are. They never get stuck in this. They never get stuck in like, oh, you recognize all of my flaws, and they're able to just not pretend that they don't exist, but saying that's not it. You need to go deeper. And when they're able to look at you like that and see the oneness and see how you're valued and see how you are a chip off the divine block, it's that becomes one, and that becomes love, and that becomes word light, because we just don't have the accurate words for it. But the way Ram Dass would describe his, seeing how Neem Karoli Baba was here and not here, it's like, yeah, those are the tzaddikim. Yeah, they go to the bathroom and they eat food, but they are definitely not playing with the same deck of cards. And it's inspirational, and we could tap into that just for a few moments here and there. But so what?
Mm-hmm.
No, the light switch goes on, and it doesn't matter how long it's been dark for.
Right.
It's just like, oh, right. And so are they in a psychedelic state of oneness? I think that's a really great way of putting it, and everything they're doing. It could be the most mundane, it could be the most spiritual. Neem Karoli Baba was sitting there eating oranges and having his feet tickled. It's you could see tzaddikim, the gurus who are, giving out, eating, people watch them eat. Just the idea of Gila B'Kedusha, eating in a holy way, and just taking everything physical and making it all about God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, then I guess you're constantly tripping, and you're constantly going deeper. And you read about Rav Kook, and these people are just in love with everything and everyone, because everything's bursting with just, more and more and more light, and more and more love. And it sounds, a little bit hippy dippy, but these people were very serious. Like, they weren't messing around, and they cared so much about humanity, and they care about, you would go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and you would feel like you're the only person that exists in the world. And he had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who were counting on him, who were depending on him. And everybody felt like he was my guy. And after, he's been, gone in the physical form for 25 years now, I think. His impact is felt so much more profoundly than ever. And that's speaking to this power of being able to, if you're not just a role and you're a soul, then the soul is eternal.
So my question is sort of, and just to play not devil's advocate, but
play
for
devil's
lack of a
advocate,
better term, like, what's the point? So what is this all like kind of just like masturbatory? Like, I'm so aware and aware of the love and the consciousness and the oneness. Like, what do we do with that? What is it? What difference does it make in the world?
Again, that's the thing. Lo ha-midrash ha'ikar la'maisa. Speaking, expounding upon the principles of the law is not the main thing. The main thing is the practice. And the idea of the bodhisattva, the idea of the tzaddik, they're not here for themselves. They're here to because they knew what was going on, again, in the spiritual realms, and they were chilling there, and they say, you know what, I'm good. I'm going to go back down and, do as much as and it's that selfless service that we all have to be able to do. Because if, like you said, it becomes spiritual, masturbatory, navel gazing, where it's just like, oh, and there's so much spiritual narcissism, and we get stuck there too. Like, why do you want to be enlightened? Because I want to dunk on that guy, right? But if you want to be enlightened because you want to be connected to the divine, and once you have that, you want to share that, but it can't be in a way. I think he said, like, his Ram Dass's brother, was in a mental institution, and he said, he think I'm Jesus, and Ram Dass says, yeah, you are, and he says, and I am too. He's like, no, only I am. That's the problem. If you think you're the only one, then you've missed out. But if you start to recognize yourself, and you see yourself through these lenses, and then you start to see other people through these lenses, and help them see themselves through these lenses, then you're creating a messianic, consciousness. I mean, the Messiah in the Jewish tradition, I believe, is a person. But it's an era. It's a time period where everyone is literally living with a consciousness that everything is in its right place, and the sages in the Talmud would bless each other and say, "Olamcha nireh b'chayecha." I think it's the greatest blessing. I bless you. I bless myself. That your world, again, that spiritual world, the world to come, the world that is always perpetually coming, should be seen in your world right now. That's be here now. Because if you think it's over there, you're mistaken. And if you think that it's after you leave your body here, that's just can't be it. And so if you're working all this time to like perfect yourself in order to get to somewhere, then you're not here right now, and you've kind of missed the boat. Because the only way to connect to divinity, the only way to be in the light, to be in presence, is right now.
I mean, you have to embody that though too. I was actually doing my own Hitbodedut practice the other day, and I was saying, high five. And
High five,
what was
totally.
that? You were putting your hand up.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
and I love it. You're so open about your spirituality and the connecting of the practices. You could be the bodhisattva. Who knows?
No, I mean, I'm totally not there yet. I have way too much spilkas for that. But I was saying to myself, to God, I was thinking, whatever, the theme that was coming up for me was like, this feels like a rehearsal, like I feel like I'm doing life, like it's happening, but a part of me feels like there's going to be, there's always this idealized version of like the me that does yoga every day, and the me that meditates every day, and the me that eats perfectly and does all these practices. Then I'll be fully me, and then I'll be doing fully life, and things will just flow. But right now it's like, I'm not consistent with my practices, and I wake up tired, and I'm dealing with Lyme disease, and like there's all this sort of like stuff that's like, that makes me feel like this isn't the real thing. This isn't the right now. Like the thing, like the time to come, the world to come is like not in this moment. And then I was saying to myself, like, I was talking to a friend, and he said something to the effect of like, no, like you have to embody the you, embody what it is to like be in that like kind of ideal space, like who are you? What do you do? How do you act? How do you treat yourself? How do you treat others? When, all of the stars line up as you say that you kind of want them to. And I think that's kind of part of it, is like this sort of like, what is be here now is like the infinite psychedelic moment encompasses all the moments. And I think that's sort of when the boundaries kind of fall away, you recognize, what was it in the beginning of the Doors of Perception? There's that quote, like, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear as it is, infinite. You'd realize that like all the moments are bounded up right now anyways. And so start acting like it. Start acting like that future perfect time is happening right now.
Yeah. And there is a meditative technique to imagine yourself if you were the guru, if you were the tzaddik, if you were your ideal self, because you could do that right now. I mean, all these thoughts are just thoughts, right? And that's this idea that you don't know who you are, beyond, let all those judgments, let those opinions just be that.
Right.
And then, in I'm so excited. I get so much what I want to say. In the John Hopkins song, where he has the voiceover from he's like awesome, or maybe it's
Right.
also, I can't tell. I don't know, but it's like awesome. It's like, yeah, it's like right now, it can't be any different. And so we tell ourselves that we feel, because we felt it, then it means it's more meaningful. But it's like, it doesn't. I mean, emuna, faith, is this idea where there's absolutely no feeling at all. It's like doing it without any external motivation. Like, why am I? You say sometimes you're just going through those motions, and it's like, yeah, I'm doing this because of faith, and that is so deeply profound. It's like, but we resist it. We need it to be sexier. We need
Mhm.
it to be we need there to be fireworks. We need someone to look at us and see it. But it's none of it can happen in public. It can only happen in the heart space. It can only happen in private. And so this idea that when I get to is our biggest, evil inclination. We'll call it the Yetzer Hara. We'll call it whatever that is. But that's what gets us stuck. When I become, what is it going to look like? You won't have the neuroses. You won't have the doubts about the physical appearance. You won't have the fact that you did something in high school that you regret. It won't. It's just like, what are you going to do with that? And it's like, there's no past, there's no future. There's just right now. And that doesn't mean if you hurt somebody that you don't beg forgiveness, but we're talking about the things that you might have done to yourself, or the thoughts or beliefs that you grew up with, the internalized voice that, as little children, we, weren't really so cognizant of. And next thing you know, hey, how come every time someone, looks at me funny, I start to think like, what did I do wrong? And
Mhm.
like, that doesn't have to be, the only truth, but we accept it hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
But intuitively, especially when we're surrounded or exposed to these types of teachings and teachers, there has to be more. It's just like, and he's like, yeah, no, no, no. This is the way. This is the human condition. It's like, I don't think so. I don't think that that's the way we want to go.
Well, I mean, one more thing, and I also know we're getting to time here.
Hmm.
Maharaji always said, feed everyone. And that sort of feels like, when in doubt, if you can't meditate, if you're just like not feeling it, like at least just do something that takes you out of yourself for the sake of someone else. Like
Yeah,
whether that's just like immersing yourself in some sort of service or your work or whatever it is, like something that connects you to like a thing, a person, a community, a cause
yeah.
that's beyond
I mean,
yourself.
another comparison, from the Lubavitch Rebbe. He said that if you, someone was talking about his, reluctance to start teaching. He's like, if you know the letter Aleph, which is, the like the letter A in the Hebrew alphabet, then teach Aleph.
Hmm.
Meaning, if you feel like you can do something, feed, care for, call someone, just do that and see how that is also, be like, oh, but that person is doing something that's in my mind more meaningful or more valued. And it's like, says who? Says that awful critical voice in your head. And it's just like, for what? I mean, why are we going around looking at ourselves through this? It was actually in last week's or 2 weeks ago, the weekly Torah portion. It's one of like the first Hasidic teachings that I saw. And it's not even just like the whole idea. It's just a question where it's talking about Noah and the ark that he built. And the commentators say that Noah was a tzaddik. Again, this righteous individual. And because of the strange language in the verse, so there's a rabbinic commentary that says there are those who say that he was a righteous individual, and they say he was praiseworthy, and some say that it was something he was denigrating because he could have been more or he didn't do enough. And the Hasidic masters say, if you could see somebody positively or you could see someone negatively, why would you ever see them negatively? And that's just the whole idea. It's like, we have this choice, how we view ourselves, how we relate to ourselves. And those judgments and those opinions of the minds are just the opinions and judgments of the mind. Why can't I forgive myself? Why can't you forgive yourself? It's because we're not seeing it correctly. So whatever we need to do to correct our eyesight and see with the eyes of the tzaddikim, to see with the way that, the most loving, caring individuals. And that's also a meditation that I do with my clients, of just like, see yourself surrounded by these people who just look at you and all they see is this cute, sweet little baby girl, this cute, sweet baby boy who's just, again, why do you love your baby? What the question doesn't even begin. It doesn't even start.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what do you need to do to forgive yourself? And what do you need to do to not need to feel like, that anxiety, you don't change by being negative. You change by being positive, straight up. I change by being positive. You change by being positive. But we resist it because that conditioning, and it's a real struggle. But I think that through these types of diburim, these words, they clear the air. We're going to start empowering people. We're going to start empowering ourselves. We have to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. We have to walk the walk, and we have to find spiritual leaders who don't get caught up in the spiritual narcissism. And you have to be super careful with the psychedelics, with the meditation, with the yoga. There's, crazy wisdom out there, but it's also these types of exalted souls they can go very high and they can go very low. And we have to not put our faith in, people who we can't, trust like that. But once you're able to do that, it could be so liberating.
Well, wow. Thank you, Benjy. So
Are you kidding? This is the best.
Yeah, I could go on all day, honestly. And
I'm ready. I'm ready. I mean, you've got people who are getting bored, but I'm saying I'm just getting
certainly
warmed
not.
up.
Yeah, totally. So is there anything else you want to talk about or add or discuss or?
No, I'd love to be able to continue this. I want to again say major props to what you and Shelby are doing with Double Blind. And I love how open and because you're out in the world, like you're a worldly person, and you're connecting with, all these different publications, all these news outlets, and, your Judaism is such a strong part of you. And I find that to be so inspirational, because a lot of people, when they feel like they want to get out there and, they sort of have to change. And again, something that we take from Ram Dass of just like, hey, embrace your traditions, embrace your beliefs. And that's because that's more meaningful than anything. And so
I think it's that authenticity that, I grew up with so many Jewish people kind of being Hindus and Bujus, and,
they're searching. The neshama, the soul, is searching for so much more.
Mm-hmm. And you just have to be what you are. So
yeah. Or not. And then you get to come back again. But if you can really be who you are, if you can really be who you are, then, it just empowers other people to be who they are. And then there's that safety, there's that safeness, and that warmth and that empathy, and just like that realness. I mean, we're craving authenticity, and we're putting all of our lives online, and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And it's just like, who are you?
Right.
And, we have to start getting and doing these internal practices to finally get to know who we are. And we forget the perfect offering, let the light in through those cracks. I'm blanking on a poem that I just heard recently from Tara Brach that I want to send you, but I can't. Can I send to you afterwards and you'll read it if you like it?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
good.
it's a good one. And yeah, we should just continue to believe in ourselves, to believe in the power of the righteous individuals who really can show us the way. And again, to remember that, if we're able to be here now, then, what else do you need?
That's amen. So, how can people find you, find out about your work, follow you on the internet?
I'm going to work on that. I'm working on a website, and definitely check out Reconcious Medical. Dr. Mark Bronstein is doing some great work. Hopefully we're going to do a ketamine, intensive ketamine, 3-day ketamine sessions in December. And we're talking about doing other things, maybe for the more, not necessarily Hamish community, but the, Shomer Shabbos, Shomer Kashrut, where people can be exposed to these modalities and not feel like it's a different, I don't have to go to the jungles of Peru with some Icaros and some priests. Maybe we could bring in, and I've been speaking to some very, top shelf rabbinic authorities who are really supportive. So it's just, I'll keep you posted about that. And then, we have, wonderful friends upstate who we love, Aaron, And it's happening, it's bubbling, it's boiling. I think I've told this to you a few times. Like I just want to have, play some sort of bit role, some
Mhm.
sort of supporting actor role. I don't need to be leading the charge like you, but to be able to continue to these words and these conversations, I think it manifests these ideas into reality, and will spark someone. And we're all part of this flame that needs to be just joined together and build that fire. And
Mhm.
then that's the spiel for now.
Well, thank you so much, and everyone, please find Benjy Epstein on the internet.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Here's one thing I want to.
yeah,
I am also, because again, the ideas of being and presence and
yes.
Havaya, but my initials are Ben, Epstein, and it's just like Benjy Epstein is B, and my Hebrew name, I don't think I've shared this, is Binyamin Yecheskel. So Benjamin, well, it's actually Jared, but no one needs to know that. But like, is the letter Bet Yud, which also the word be. So like in my name, is this idea of be. So like, that's it. I'm copywriting the whole idea of being, because like that's,
Oh,
and there's
I
a
love
famous
that.
story in the Talmud where somebody, I'm going with this.
Yeah, no, keep
Oh,
going.
so where there's a person who spent his entire life, in real, addiction and real debauchery, just very, very, hedonistic life. And he had this epiphany, and he realized, I don't want to be like this anymore. And he started to just have this unbelievably powerful, transformational, tshuva, which is a return, but also self-transformation. And he cries to the heavens, and they say, "We can't help you." And he turns to the mountains, and he has this like very, clearly type of psychedelic experience again. And then he realizes, and this is the expression in Hebrew, "Ein hadavar talui ella bi."
Mm.
The only thing the only way I could is that it's up to me. Like I'm the only one who can forgive myself. And with that, his soul departed. And again, the Hebrew word be and the English word be, and the fact that it's like all so connected, like it's Eina Davatale Ella be. I'm the only one. I'm the one who can change this karma. I'm the one who can change this and fully accept what happened and let go and forgive. And it says that his soul departed. And it says that one of the other, sages, used to cry and say how a person can acquire his world, olamo, again, that world of just, of oneness, of being in one moment, just that moment.
Wow.
And so it's like that idea of be, and in being in my name is just sort of like, so I'm drawn to it. And it's definitely an honor to even be, talking with somebody who, has seen him, and seen that, and I believe in the power of the righteous individuals. And the blessing on all of us to stay connected to those people. And that could be our friends, it could be our family. It doesn't have to be the guru, but, and also believe that there's a bit of guru in all of us.
I love that. Thank you so much, Benjy.
And you're the best. Thank you.
You're likewise. All right. Thanks, everybody.